The addition method using multiplication. This is part 2 of the addition method. Yesterday, you learned that when you do the addition method, you have to make something cancel. But if you look at this system of equations, here it is. Negative x plus y equals negative 3. 4x plus y equals 2. The first thing we have to look at is to make sure everything is lined up. X's, y's, equal sign, and our numbers. Everything is lined up. The problem is, if you add these together, you would get 3x plus 2y equals negative 1. In this system of equations, adding the two equations does not eliminate either variable. In such a case, we are going to have to use the multiplication property. Because if you look at this, look at nothing canceled. 3x, 2y, I can't do anything because nothing canceled out. We always have to make one of the variables cancel. So here's what you're going to do. What you're going to have to do is multiply either equation or both by a number to make something cancel. So let's look at number 1. Now, the first example here. I am going to show you two separate ways to do this problem. So let's start off by looking at this, the x's. This x is what? This x is a 4x. This x is a negative 1. If you want these to cancel, let's say this was 4x. What would this have to be? This would also have to be a negative 4x, but it's a negative 1. So what could I do with this to make it a negative 4? I could multiply it by 4. So what you're going to do is for every equation, you have to determine, do you want to get rid of your x's or do you want to get rid of your y's? And then you have to multiply the entire equation by a number to make it cancel. So if I multiply the entire top equation by 4, you would get negative 4x plus 4y equals negative 12. Now the equation really didn't change. It's the same equation, but you've made it a equivalent equation. It's like the same thing as taking 1/2. 1/2 and 4/8 would be the same fraction. It's the same meaning. It's the same thing with these two equations. They're the same. You just took the first one and multiplied it by 4. Now the second equation is going to stay the same. Now notice what I'm doing. I am writing everything over to the right. I suggest you do that on your homework to make it easier. So now look, if you combine these two together, the x's are going to cancel. So now if we solve this, x's cancel. 4y plus 1y is 5y. Negative 12 plus 2 is negative 10. I now divide by 5. Y equals negative 2. I now have to plug that y equals negative 2 back into one of our equations. Now you can plug it in. You have 4 equations here. This one, this one, this one, or this one. It does not matter. I'm going to take this and plug it in right here. So that would give me 4x minus 2 equals 2. So I add 2 on both sides. I get 4x equals 4. Divide by 4, x equals 1. So my answer is 1, negative 2. Alright, now the next problem, negative x plus y equals negative 3, and 4x plus y equals 2 is the exact same problem. Except now I'm going to show you how to do it by eliminating the y's. Once again, everything is lined up and ready to go. But let's say I want to get rid of my y's. Both of these are 1s. If one of them is a 1, the other would have to be a negative 1. It's the same thing with our x's. Our x's, if one was 4, the other has to be negative 4. If one was 7, the other would have to be negative 7. If it was 8, the other one would be negative 8. We have to make them opposites so they cancel. So, I don't care which one you make a negative, but how would you make a 1 a negative 1? You multiply it by negative 1. So if we multiply the first or second equation by -1, we would be correct. So if we multiply the first equation by -1, you would get x minus y equals 3. The second equation would stay the same. Look at what happens. 1x plus 4x is 5x. The y's cancel. 3 plus 2 is 5. So that means x would be 1. I take x equals 1. I plug it in, let's say to the first one. It doesn't matter. You can plug it into either x. If I plug it into the first one, that would be -1 plus y equals -3. I add 1, I add 1. You get y equals -2. So we get the same answer as 1, -2, as we did in the first example. Example number 1. -y equals 7 minus 4x. And 5x plus 3y equals 13. Step 1, we have to line everything up. So if we line everything up, I want to get my x's and y's on the left side, my numbers on the right. So our second equation, 5x plus 3y equals 13, perfect, it's done. In our first equation, we have the minus 4x over here. I got to move it over. So how do I move a minus 4x to the other side? You're going to add 4x. So if I add 4x, you're going to get 4x minus y equals 7. The bottom equation stays the same. All right, so now we're looking at both of our equations, and we have to figure out what would be easier, to eliminate the x's or to eliminate the y's. Here's a hint. One always has to be positive, one has to be negative. So if we're looking at our x's, what does the first number 5 and 4 go into? It'd be 20. So one of these would have to be positive 20. The other would have to be negative 20. That means I have to multiply both equations. But if we look at our y's, one is already a positive and one is already a negative. So the bottom one says 3y. If this is 3y, this one would have to be negative 3y. Well, right now it's -1. So how would you make this a -3? You'd multiply it by 3. So let's multiply the top equation by 3, and we have to multiply everything by 3. That would give me 12x minus 3y equals 21. The second equation stays the same. Add them together, you get 17x, our y's cancel, equals 34. I divide both sides by 17, x equals 2. Take your x equals 2, plug it back in. What looks the easiest? Well, to me, this one looks the easiest. Once again, you could plug it in. Here for x, here for x, here for x, here for x, or here. You have 6 different choices. So that would give me an equation of -y equals 7 minus 4x. X is 2. So that would give me -y equals 7 minus 8. -y equals -1. Divide by -1, divide by -1, y equals +1. So my answer would be 2, 1. Example number 2. -4y equals x minus 3. And 2x plus 3y equals -9. Step 1, get everything all lined up. So we have x, y equals our number. So the second equation is okay. The first equation, the x is over here. We have to move it over to the left. So how do I move a plus x? I'd subtract x on both sides. So that would give me -x minus 4y equals -3. The second equation is 2x plus 3y equals -9. Everything is now lined up. Everything is lined up, ready to go. So let's look at our x's and y's. our x's or our y's. They both have a negative and both have a positive, so that's okay. If we wanted to get rid of our y's, you'd have to make them both 12, which means you'd multiply the top equation by 3, the bottom equation by 4. Well, our first terms are x terms. This is a 2x, so this would have to be negative 2x. So how could you make the first term a negative 2x? You'd multiply the first equation by 2. So if we multiply the first equation by 2, we would get negative 2x minus 8y equals negative 6. Our second equation doesn't change. Add them together. X's cancel. Negative 8y plus 3y is negative 5y. Negative 6 minus 9 is negative 15. I divide both sides by negative 5. We get y equals positive 3. So I take that y equals positive 3. Let's plug it in. I'm going to plug it in right there. 2x plus 3 times 3 equals negative 9. That gives me 2x plus 9 equals negative 9. Subtract 9. 2x equals negative 18. Divide both sides by 2. I get x equals negative 9. Therefore, my answer is negative 9, 3. Example number 3. 5x plus 6y equals 14, and 3x minus 4y equals 16. Everything is lined up. Our x, our y's, our equal signs, our numbers. So now we have to figure out what to eliminate. Now if we look at our first terms, we have 5 and 3. What does the first number 5 and 3 go into? It will be 15. So one of these would have to be 15. One of these would have to be negative 15. Our y's, 6 and 4. What does the first number 6 and 4 go into? Well, our first multiple is 12. So one would have to be positive 12, one would have to be negative 12. I would say that it would be easier to get rid of your y's because one's already positive and one's already negative. So we need to make them 12. Now you could also make them 24. You could make them 60. But the least common multiple would be 12. That's the easiest one to make them. So let's make the first equation a 12y. So what would you multiply the first equation by to make that a 12? Well, it'd have to be 2. So we multiply everything by 2, and we would get 10x plus 12y equals 28. The second equation, we need to make a negative 12y. Well, we already have negative 4, so we would have to multiply it by 3. So in this problem, you have to multiply both equations by a number to be able to get the same thing to cancel, to be able to eliminate something in our other equations. So if we multiply it by 3, we're going to get 9x minus 12y equals 16 times 3, which is what? 48. Add your equations. 10x plus 9x is 19x. Y's cancel. 28 plus 48 is 76. Divide by 19. 76 divided by 19 gives you 4. So now we need to find our y. So which equation looks easier to you? Well, I'm going to plug it into the first one because that looks easier. Because I don't see a negative, so let's just stick with the first equation. Now you could plug it in here on the second one. You could do that. So let's plug this in. 5 times x, which is 4, plus 6y equals 14. Solve the equation. 20 plus 6y equals 14. Subtract 20. 6y equals negative 6. Divide both sides by 6. Y equals negative 1. So our answer is 4, negative 1.